Hello everyone, and welcome back to World of Warships Blitz with Terry. So here I was, thinking by myself, you know what, I keep talking about, or I keep basically doing haha at people damage controlling single fires, and I should probably explain why. So I figured, okay, well, what do we do? We'll just do a little bit of, we'll have a look at what the in-game information is, and then we'll do a little bit of a test and some numbers, and, you know, makes up for a nice little video of, like, you know, this sort of explainer, like a game mechanic explainer, and off we go, and Bob's your uncle, and we've got one more down for the next weeks. Then, well, it got interesting. So, fair warning, this video does contain math. If you do not like math, then feel free to skip to the end, or you know, just ignore the mathy bits and enjoy the, I don't know, the colorful pictures or something. Anyway, fires and flooding. So let's begin with the in-game description of how English, Terry, do you speak it? How fires and flooding work. So fires. Each HE shell and bomb has a chance of to set fire on a target. Maximum of 3 fires can be set on a single target simultaneously. So you can have up to 3 fires on your ship. Each fire does damage over a 20-second period, equal to 10% of the target's maximum HP. So you lose 10% of your hit points, not of your remaining hit points, but of your total hit points, over a period of 20 seconds. And the flooding works in a similar way, only that you can have only 1 flood at a time. You can't have 2 floods at the same time. In return, however, flooding does damage over a 20-second period for 25% of the target's maximum HP. So a flood takes down, well, a quarter of your health. Which means that, by very, very simple math, to say a flood is worse than a double fire, because 2 fires would be 20% and 3 fires would be 30, which is more than the 25 you take from a flood. But what does that mean in practice? Well, we're not yet done actually going through the mechanics, because there's a fine print. The fire and flooding resistance. Fire and flooding resistance can reduce the chances of fire and flooding. This sounds like the kind of thing they print on vitamins here. Can improve your overall health. It's sort of the, we made a claim, but we're totally not, but you totally can't sue us about it, because we never said it would, or said it can, right? There's a possibility that it does. I am not sure if that was the intent with the phrasing here, but we'll get to that. Because the first part's obvious, right? So you've got fire and flooding resistance, so there is like a factor reduction or a saving throw, or have you not. And from my previous testing with fires, it actually kind of works like that. It works out pretty much like that. So it reduces the fire chance, more or less. The second part is much more interesting, because fire and flooding resistance can reduce fire and flooding damage. Does it, though? Well, yes, it does. But that's where it got really weird. So let's look at the großer Kur first. Why am I looking at the großer Kur first? Because the großer Kur first has a lot of HP, so we're not running into any kind of rounding errors, and because it's a German battleship and they tend to be on fire quite a little. So not into the comparison. That is the wrong screen, Terry. Do not go there. Go here. That's where we want to go. So we have 66,695 hit points on the ship. I've got the historical camo on it. And we have a fire and flooding resistance of 12.5%, which means the logical conclusion would be that we have a 12.5% reduction factor in incoming fire chance, and we have a 12.5% reduction of damage taken from fires and floods. Next, we have a commander. Now, I have put Reinhard Scheer into this to see kind of what would be the maximum, who has a 20% damage taken from fire skill, which is, besides that being a legendary skill, I think on regular commanders it's 15, is a skill that is generally recommended for battleships, because while it is extremely tempting to have the adrenaline rush, it means you are taking less damage from fires and you are in a German battleship, and being on fire is what German battleships do. The second skill, which can be a little bit more controversial, is the compartment maintenance, which reduces the damage taken from flooding by 15%. Controversial because it sits in the same slot as the master reloader, so on anything that's got rapid reload skill, you're probably not going to take this one. The Honor Seeker is an interesting skill, because especially now that we're starting to see more medals like the Close Quarters Expert and similar things, for a German battleship that might actually be quite interesting. If you can get something like First Strike and Close Quarters, you kill a destroyer with your secondaries or something, then that would be nice. So the other thing is, obviously, if you are on fire or flooding, you can use a damage control kit. So for those of you who haven't seen those before, it's that one. It's the Warship Protection. It's the advanced, or in this case, just the regular damage control kit. You only get 3. The damage control kit takes care of fires, takes care of floods, takes care of any kind of broken modules as well. So steering, guns, everything. It basically puts your ship back into normal shape. It doesn't heal anything, but it puts it back into normal shape. So these are the factors that we have. Now, what I have done is I have tried to set a fire on the Großer Kurfürst and a flood, both with and without the commander in, and see what happens. So this is where the math begins. And let me introduce you to my little spreadsheet. All right then. Let me explain what we're doing here. So the Großer Kurfürst has 68,696 hit points, because that's with the preventive maintenance consumable. So in game, she actually has more hit points than in the base stats. We have a fire and flooding resistance factor of 12.5% or 0.125. We have the fire damage factor, which is 10%. We have the fire prevention skill factor, because it's a legendary captain, it's 20%, usually it'd be 15%. And we have the flood prevention skill factor from the legendary captain again at 15%, and the flood damage factor at 25%. So I have set a single fire, and with no captain in it, what I would have expected to happen would have been ship hit points multiplied by fire damage factor, so 10% of 68,696, multiplied by 1 minus the fire and flooding resistance, because I'm assuming it reduces the amount of damage. So I would have expected 6,010 points of damage, or maybe 11 if it rounds up. In fact, the fire deals 6,611 points of damage. So there's a 600 point damage extra in here somewhere. How did that happen? I honestly have not the slightest idea. I think that's where the can comes in, because it does not work like you think it does. You do more damage than you would. Now, if we were saying, okay, maybe fire and flooding resistance does nothing and turn that to 0, that's not happening either, because that would be 6,800 points. So it does something, but it's not as much as you think it is. So in fact, the actual fire and flooding resistance does not have a full 12.5% impact, which was very surprising to me. So I've said, okay, maybe if we put the captain in and do the same thing again, let's see what happens. So again, the same thing happened. We were expecting to do 4,808 points of damage, but in fact we dealt 5,100 points of damage. Still, the effective fire damage factor is at 9.62%. Now you could say, hey, maybe the 12.5% fire and flooding resistance damage reduction factor is kind of applied to the fire damage factor. Well, it's all multiplicative, so no, it isn't, because that would mean we would have a, was it 8.75% factor? So it just doesn't add up. But at least on the plus side, we have verified that the captain skill works as advertised, and it reduces the effective fire factor. So that's a good thing. How about flooding? Does flooding work the same way? And we're doing the same thing again. I would have expected a flooding damage of 15,027 points of damage by taking the base HP. And yes, I've also tried this without the consumable. No, it doesn't add up either. I have not found a combination where this actually makes sense. So there must be a factor in there that doesn't make sense. By the way, I've also tried to do this multiple times. So no, it's also not RNG based. I get the same values every time. It just doesn't line up with the numbers in game. So I would have expected that value, which would have been the base hit points, the maximum hit points, multiplied by the flooding damage factor, multiplied by 1 minus the fire and flooding resistance factor. So the fire and flooding resistance does not apply fully to actual damage reduction. I don't know if it applies fully to actually preventing the setting of fire and flood in the first place, because that is way too much RNG dependent in order to determine that reliably. But in fact, the damage we have dealt is once again significantly higher this time. So it's 1,500 points extra damage that we've done pretty much, which leads us to an effective flooding factor of 24%. So the fire and flooding resistance has done something, but it hasn't quite done as much as we thought it was going to do. So if we put the commander skill in, again, it's the same story here. We are actually doing significantly more damage than we should be doing if we follow the math in the game. But the skill works, and it does reduce the amount of damage you're taking from flooding. So given that you can have more than one fire, we have double fire and triple fire, effective, not hypothetical. And the same thing with the captain skill, which brings us to this nice little bar chart. So what does that mean? The red bar is fires taken without the necessary commander reduction skill. The second is damage taken from a single fire with the skill. The blue bar are flood damage and flood with skill damage. This is why I'm saying don't damage control single fires if you are, well, first under threat of being set on fire again. So if you're coming under fire from, say, a Worcester or a British battleship or an American aircraft carrier, and you damage control a single fire, you will be on triple fire. And these fires will burn through. And 3 fires, as you can see here on the right side, 3 fires actually do more damage than a flood. And you can stack a flood on top of that as well still, if it's a carrier. With 2 fires, you are getting reasonably close. So you're still taking less damage from 2 fires than you would from a flood. So if there are torpedoes incoming, or if there's an aircraft carrier going for dropping some bombs on you, you take 2 fires, and you can see the torpedo bombers incoming already. It's a choice, right? Do you think that he's going to set a flood? Or are you willing to let the two fires burn and guess that he's gonna strike while your damage control is ready, or is he going to just hold off and let the fires do the damage? And then there it becomes very, very situational. With triple fires, they definitely do more damage than a flood. So if you've got 3 fires burning if it's an American carrier and you've got 3 fires burning, then you may as well just damage control them immediately. If you wait, then it makes no more sense. But if you damage control them immediately and then take a flood, then that'll still do less damage than the triple fire would have. Even though with the relative commander skills, the difference between the two actually shrinks somewhat, that it's not a huge difference anymore. But that, in a nutshell, is why I generally recommend not damage controlling a single fire, especially if you are seeing yourself in a chance of being set on fire again or being flooded within the period it takes for your damage control to come off cooldown. And with a surprising, or you could say unsurprising, side note that no, this doesn't work as advertised. So here we are. And if you've got a better explanation for this than I do, then I'm all ears. I'd love to hear a good theory. That's it for me today. Thanks everybody, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.